WHGE 95.3 FM coming up, the Open Eye.
Those of us that indulge in or commit intellectual violence when do so for the pleasure of mental masturbation or even diddling. We do
Morning, Sherry. Technical difficulties up in here. Good morning, my children of the sun. Welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm your host, Third Eye Optometrist Patrice Gibbs, here to get that eye open. Sorry I'm so late. We had some technical difficulties. Hopefully I have cleared that up, and we are going to go on with our hour or however long it takes for me to get your eye open. All right. First, let me get my disclaimer out the way right quick. All right.
The views and opinions expressed on Open Eye are those of the hosts, guests, and contributors, and do not reflect the policy or position of WHGE 95.3 FM nor our sponsor, the Delaware Center for Homeless Vets. Any content provided by Open Eye's hosts, guests, or contributors are theirs and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, company, or individual.
All right. WHGE 95.3 FM. Let me get some PSAs out the way right quick. All right. Save the date coming up in August. In spite of the tragedy of Mother Church burning down, the August Quarterly Committee is going to keep going. So save the date for August Quarterly Week 2026. It will be August 23rd through August the 30th. We'll have the Youth Explosion, the Big Quarterly Gospel Festival, Revival Night, worship services, Liberation Fest, and more. They will have on Saturday, August the 1st at 11 a.m. It will be presented by the August Festival Committee, Women of Style and Substance. Guest speaker will be Pastor Bernadette Mills. Okay, moving right along. And of course, they will have the, it's not, what's that, a week from tomorrow, I think. Sunday, June 21st, they will have the Gospel Skate Night. Okay, admission will be $10 per ticket. Compete for the $1,000 prize awarded to the church with the most tickets purchased. It will be at Christiana Skating Rink. All right. Let's move right along and get on with the show here. Okay. Some of this here. Every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. You know, what's the day? What is the date here? The 13th. Monday is the 15th. And even though I covered this last week, I feel I have no choice, especially considering the reaction that I got from some people, but to come on this again. Displacement is not homeless strategy. Okay? And the plan is Christina Park, where it's been a tent city. Well, now we're being told that the people living in Christina Park have to go by Monday. All right? A deadline is not a plan. An eviction is not a solution. Displacement is not compassion, Mayor Carney. If Wilmington truly wants to address homelessness, then the conversation must move beyond removal and toward housing, services, treatment, and dignity. Anything less is simply moving people from one crisis to the next. Damn. All right, Brother Anthony, I see you there. All right. We're going to get moving right along here. Okay, yeah. All right. You know, there's an old saying that darkness fears the light. Not because the light is loud, not because the light is violent, but because the light reveals what darkness would rather keep hidden. That's the purpose of this program. The open eye was never created to comfort people who are comfortable with injustice. Excuse me. It was never designed to tell convenient lies or repeat safe talking points. It was created to ask difficult questions, challenge accepted narratives, and encourage people to think for themselves. We live in a time when information is everywhere, but understanding is sacred. Scarce. We are surrounded by noise, distractions, slogans, and algorithms that tell us what to think, what to buy, what to fear, and even who we should hate. Yet despite all this noise, the truth remains stubborn. It waits patiently for those willing to seek it. That is what we do here. We examine history because history is not dead. We discuss race because race continues to shape the world around us. We talk about power because power affects every aspect of our lives. We challenge assumptions because unquestioned assumptions become chains. Some people hear these conversations and become uncomfortable. I don't give a damn. That's understandable. Growth is uncomfortable. Truth is uncomfortable. Looking into a mirror is uncomfortable when you have spent years avoiding your own reflection. But discomfort is not harm. Disagreement is not oppression. And asking questions is not a crime. Every generation has had voices that challenge the status quo. Every generation had people who were told to be quiet, to sit down, to stop making others uncomfortable. And every advance in human freedom came because someone refused to obey those demands. So today, as always, we will keep your eyes open. We will examine what others overlook. We will question what others accept, and we will continue to pursue knowledge without fear and without apology. This is the Open Eye. That's right, brother. Black Power. Hey, Steve. WHGE 95.3 FM. Every summer I see it. I go to the supermarket on a Saturday and see some of our people getting some watermelon and some of our people looking like, ooh, don't be carrying that watermelon around. Yeah. The watermelon trope. That's where how freedom became a weaponized image. Let's talk about one of the most persistent, most cartoonish, and most misunderstood racist images in American culture. The idea that black people have some special childlike obsession with watermelon. Most people today treat it like an old joke, a relic, Jim Crow advertising, or minstrel shows. But the truth is sharper, more revealing, and far more political. This stereotype wasn't ancient. It wasn't cultural. It wasn't even organic. It was engineered deliberately at a very specific moment in American history and for a very specific purpose. The watermelon trope was born the moment black freedom became real. During the Civil War and immediately after emancipation, formerly enslaved black people did something profoundly American. They farmed. They grew watermelons. They ate them. They sold them. They built small, independent economies around them. And that mattered. Because in the 1860s, a black person selling produce on their own terms, keeping their own profit, controlling their own labor, feeding their own families was a political act. It was a declaration of autonomy. It was freedom you could taste. Watermelons became a symbol of black self-sufficiency, a symbol of dignity, a symbol of economic independence in a country that had spent centuries insisting black people were incapable of any of those things. And that's exactly why the backlash came. White Southerners reeling from the loss of their slave labor force understood the symbolism instantly. They saw black people growing and selling watermelons, and they saw a threat. Not a fruit, a threat. So they did what white supremacist systems have always done when confronted with black progress. They took the very symbol of black freedom and twisted it into a caricature. They portrayed black people as greedy, messy, childish, lazy, lounging in the sun with watermelon juice dripping down their faces. They turned a fruit into a tool of humiliation. This wasn't random. It wasn't innocent. It was propaganda. A campaign to make black freedom look like black incompetence. A way to turn black economic independence into something laughable. A way to police black presence in public spaces by painting it as unruly and undesirable. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, the trope had gone national. Postcards, advertisement, sheet music, toys, political cartoons. The watermelon stereotype was everywhere. It became so widespread that its origin story disappeared under the weight of repetition. By 1900, most Americans had no idea the stereotype was only a few decades old. They didn't know it was born out of fear, not fact. They didn't know it was a backlash to black success, not a reflection of black culture. And that's the point. Propaganda works best when people forget it ever had a purpose. Why that matters today. This isn't about fruit. It's about a pattern. Every time black people in America have taken a step toward autonomy, land ownership, education, political power, economic mobility, a stereotype has risen to meet them. A stereotype designed to shrink them, shame them, or shove them back into a box. The watermelon trope is just one example. But it's a perfect example. It shows how racism adapts, how it disguises itself as humor, how it hides its political roots behind a smile or a joke. And it reminds us that nothing in American racial imagery is accidental. Everything has a history. Everything has a purpose. And sometimes the silliest images carry the heaviest truths. So the next time someone laughs at the old watermelon stereotype, remember, They're not laughing at a fruit. They're laughing at a freedom that once scared America so much it had to be mocked into submission. This is the open eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is the open eye. Third eye optometrist Patrice Gibbs. Let me tell you about community ingredients. Okay? A liquor store is not community. A church by itself is not a community. A pawn shop sure as hell is not a community. And a foreign-owned corner store is not community. Those are extraction points, not institutions. They take from the neighborhood, but they do not circulate within it. They survive whether the people thrive or not. They are symbols of a place denied the tools to build itself. A real community, a self-sustaining community, a self-respecting, self-determining community rests on institutions that create stability, circulate resources, and anchor identity. A bank, so money stays, grows, and returns to the people who earned it. A school, so children inherit more than struggle. A hospital, so health is not a luxury or a bus ride away. A supermarket, so nourishment is not dependent on someone else's markup. And a library, so knowledge is free, accessible, and communal. Those five are the skeleton of a functioning neighborhood. Everything else is a decoration. And here's the truth beneath the noise. They're not afraid of your boycott. Yeah. They're afraid of your store. A boycott is just temporary pressure. A store is permanent power. A boycott says, we're upset. A store says, we don't need your ass. A boycott disrupts their profits. A store replaces their position and brings home the profit. Because the moment you build your own institutions, your own bank, your own school, your own supermarket, your own library, the entire economic relationship flips. You stop being a customer and become a competitor. You stop being dependent and become sovereign. Communities are not built by protest alone. They are built by infrastructure. And once you build that infrastructure, you ain't got to beg a goddamn soul to respect you, and they could keep their respect. This is the open eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. Hey, Bree. I see you there. All right. Y'all hear about this? Did y'all hear about this? What should have been a nice family celebration quickly turned into a nightmare for one South Georgia family. A man is accused of yelling racial slurs at them and then shooting at them with an AR-15 style rifle. Jeffrey Tyler Kinzer was arrested on Sunday. Lee County deputies reported. He was charged with aggravated assault. I had to stop right there on that report. And he was released the next day on a $5,000 bond. This son of a bitch went to a family reunion and he hollered racial slurs at the participants, the black family. That didn't bother them. So he went home and put on his armor, got an AR-15 and came back and shot at them, and they charged him with aggravated assault. If you shoot at somebody, you're trying to kill them. This attempted murder, the hell's wrong with y'all? And then let him out on a $5,000 bond. God damn. Hey. My children of the sun, let me tell you something. When people ask whether racism still exists, they imagine racism as a bad thought, a rude comment, an offensive joke, an ignorant opinion. But racism has always been more than a thought. Oh yeah, Brother Anthony, yeah, he got shot, Brad. His brother in there from the Marines bust a cap in his ass. Racism is what happens when someone sees a black family celebrating a grandmother's birthday and becomes angry simply because black people are happy. And think about that. According to the reports, the family wasn't protesting. They weren't arguing. They weren't blocking traffic. They weren't bothering anybody. They were celebrating. 3 generations of a family gathered together. Children running around, elders enjoying each other's company, food, laughter, memories. And that was enough. A white man allegedly drove by shouting racial slurs, not once, twice, because he wanted a reaction. He wanted anger, he wanted confrontation. He wanted the story to end with black people becoming villains. Yeah. But when the family refused to give him what he wanted, according to witnesses, he went home, put on body armor, grabbed the AR-style rifle, and came back. Let that sink in. A man became so enraged by the sight of black people enjoying themselves that he armed himself for war. And here's the thing. That's not new. Throughout American history, one of the greatest offenses a black person could commit was not violence, crime, or rebellion. It was existing freely. The sight of black prosperity sparked massacres in places like Tulsa. The sight of black political participation sparked terror campaigns after Reconstruction. The sight of black children integrating schools inspired mobs of grown adults to scream hatred at children. Again and again, the message is the same. We don't mind you existing as long as you know your place. The problem comes when black people refuse to stay in the place assigned to them. The family wasn't demanding anything from anybody. They were simply enjoying life. And for some people, that alone is intolerable. Now, let's talk about something else. The only reported injury was to the man who allegedly chose violence. Why? Because his family understood something that black Americans have had to understand for generations. Sometimes survival requires preparation. Nobody has a right to attack your family. Nobody has a right to terrorize your children. Nobody has a right to turn your grandmother's birthday party into a battlefield. And if someone arrives armed and determined to do harm, people have a right to defend themselves. That's not aggression, that's survival. That's right. By any means necessary. But there's another question that deserves attention. Why was a man accused of returning in body armor with a rifle able to walk out on a $5,000 bond the next day? Why were the victims allegedly not informed of his release? Why do so many people immediately suspect that connections and relationships are influencing how this case is being handled? Those questions deserve answers, because justice isn't just about making an arrest. Justice is about whether victims feel protected. Justice is about whether communities believe the law applies equally to everyone. Justice is about whether race changes how a situation is viewed, investigated, or prosecuted. More importantly, this story exposes a reality many people would rather ignore. The greatest lie ever told about racism is that it's disappearing. No, it adapts. It changes language. It changes its clothing. It changes its public presentation. But ever so often, the mask slips. And when it does, we see the same thing America has wrestled with for centuries. People who are enraged, not by black crime, not by black violence, not by black wrongdoing, but by black existence. A grandmother's birthday party should never become a crime scene. Children should never have to run for cover because someone hates the color of their skin. And no family should have to ask questions. Shashandra Wilson asked, "What did we do to deserve this?" The answer is simple. They did nothing. Their only offense was being black, being together, and refusing to stop living their lives. And for some people, that's always been too much. This is The Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs. WHGE 95.3. The education advocacy station. Yeah, you tune in here, especially when I'm on there. You're going to learn something. Let me tell you about cultural implications. America loves to talk about individual acts of violence as if they happen in a vacuum. But culturally, we know better. Every time a young man erupts with racial hostility, the country rushes to analyze the moment, the argument, the trigger, the final spark. But the spark is never the whole story. The fire starts long before that. Because in this country, it's not just a belief, it's a curriculum. And too often, it's taught at home. When a parent casually uses racial slurs, even under the disguise of humor, that's not just a bad joke, that's cultural conditioning. That's a worldview being handed down like an heirloom. And when a child grows up hearing that certain people are less than human, less deserving, less worthy, that child is being shaped into someone who will eventually act on that belief. This is the cultural implication America refuses to confront. Racism is a family value in too many households. We talk about hate groups as if they only exist online or in shadows. But the first hate group many children encounter is at the dinner table. The first propaganda they hear is spoken by someone they love. And the first lessons in superiority come from someone they trust. So when a young man grows up and harms someone or harms himself through the violence he unleashes, society suddenly wants to pretend it's a mystery. Where did this come from? How did he get this way? What went wrong? What went wrong is cultural. What went wrong is generational. What went wrong is normalized. And here's the deeper truth. When you teach a child that other people's humanity is negotiable, you are also teaching him that his own humanity is fragile. Because hatred doesn't just destroy the target, it corrodes the vessel that carries it. That is why America keeps producing the same tragedies on repeat. Because we refuse to address the casual racism that gets passed off as humor, the entitlement that gets passed off as pride, the dehumanization that gets passed off as tradition. And we want to break the cycle. We have to stop pretending the cycle starts within the child. It starts with the culture that raised them. It starts with the adults who shaped them. It starts with the language that made hatred sound normal. And until this country is ready to confront that truth, it will keep burying victims of racism in the sun's shaped body. Jeff Metcalf is responsible for his son's murder, or excuse me, for his son's death, because he wasn't murdered. He was killed practicing what he was taught. Brother Haru, glad you're here, right on time. Brother posted something that I expanded on. Same claim, different outcomes. The debate isn't whether self-defense exists, it's who gets believed. George Zimmerman, self-defense accepted, not charged, walk free, protected by law. Rick Child, self-defense accepted, charges dismissed, walk free, protected by law. No punk-ass Kyle Rittenhouse made a career, or got his 30 seconds of fame. Self-defense accepted, acquitted, walk free, praised and defended. Carmelo Anthony, self-defense rejected, charged, facing decades, future pretty much destroyed. When does self-defense get protection? Why do some claims succeed while others fail? Who gets the benefit of the doubt? Who gets believed? Let's talk about what the text you just heard really reveals. It's not just about 4 names and 4 outcomes, it's a pattern. A pattern older than the country itself, because in America, self-defense has never been just a legal doctrine. It's always been a mirror reflecting who this nation believes is worthy of protection. From the colonial courts to Jim Crow courtrooms, from slave codes to modern statutes, one thing has remained consistent: Believability has been a racial privilege. Some people walk into a courtroom presumed reasonable. Others walk in presumed dangerous. And that presumption shapes everything that follows. Self-defense law hinges on one phrase: a reasonable belief of imminent danger. But reasonable is not neutral, it's cultural, it's historical, and it's racial. For centuries, America has been trained to see white fear as reasonable, black presence as threatening, and black fear as exaggeration, black defense as aggression. So when one person says, "I fear for my life," the system nods. When another person says the same words, the system narrows its eyes. Same claim, different outcomes. Not because of the act, but because of the actor. The text you heard lays it out plainly. Some men claim self-defense and walk free. Others claim self-defense and face decades. Some are believed instantly. Others are doubted automatically. Some are shielded by the law. Others are crushed by it. This isn't about the details of each case. This is about the consistency of the outcomes. The system isn't malfunctioning. It's functioning exactly as it always has. See, the text asks the question: who gets the benefit of the doubt? Who gets believed? Who does the system protect? These aren't rhetorical questions, they're historical. From lynching era justifiable homicide rulings to modern stand your ground verdicts, the pattern is the same. White fear is validated, black fear is criminalized. Until that changes, the outcomes won't. Even today, studies show, you ain't got to take my word for it, look it up. Studies show black defendants claiming self-defense are less likely to be believed. White defendants who kill black victims are more likely to be acquitted. Prosecutors pursue charges more aggressively against black defendants. Juries interpret reasonable fear through racial stereotypes. This isn't speculation. I didn't just make this up. This is the data. This is history with a time stamp. This is not exaggeration, it's documentation. Now, if you grew up in Wilmington like I did, you don't need a study to understand this. You've seen it with your own eyes. You remember the National Guard rolling down Market Street in '68, occupying this city for 9.5 months, the longest military occupation of an American city in modern history. You remember what that taught Wilmington? It taught Wilmington fear has a color. Yeah. So when that mayonnaise mobster shot Sheila Farrell, a 14-year-old girl, for picking a peach, the law responded differently based on who was afraid. You see how the system treats black fear as hostility and white fear as common sense? You see how justice bends for some and breaks for others? You've seen how the benefit of the doubt gets handed out like a membership card. And we were not qualified for that card. Wilmington's a living archive of this truth. So when we talk about self-defense, we're not just talking about the law. We're talking about who this country believes, who this country protects, who this country values. And until the day comes when a black man's fear is treated with the same legitimacy as a white man's fear, until the day comes when reasonable means the same thing no matter who is speaking, until the day comes when justice in America in Wilmington is not determined by race, we will still keep seeing the same claim and the same unequal outcomes. I fear for my life. That's not a slogan. Because let me tell you something. If you, as a black person, man, woman, or child, find yourself surrounded by white people, your life is in danger. This is the open eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. Question we hear too often. Why do you have to make everything about race? That's the question we hear. That question is a deflection, a shield, and a way to dodge the truth. And let's be clear, you asking the wrong people. If you want to know why race keeps erupting in the conversation, don't interrogate the people who've been forced to live under the weight of it for 4 centuries. Ask the people who built the weight. Ask the people who maintain it. Ask the people who panic the moment you name it. Why did everything have to be about race? Ask the prosecutor in the Carmelo Anthony case why every black juror was struck like blackness itself was a disqualifying condition. Why do you have to make everything about race? Ask why the justice system still treats black presence as bias, but white presumption as neutrality. Why do you have to make everything about race? Ask why a white man could walk into a family reunion, a place of joy, memory, and survival, and unleash violence, and somehow the story still bends itself to explain him. And then he gets a $5,000 bond and gets to go home. Why do you have to make everything about race? Are you kidding me? Why do you have to make everything about race? Ask why Rick Child murdered a black child and while mainstream media rushed to criminalize that child instead of the grown man who chased him 130 yards away from his store. That's over the length of a football field. And shot him in the back. That's why black death is always met with suspicion, but white violence is met with sympathy. Shit. Why do you have to make everything about race? That's why the mere mention of DEI, wokeness, or critical race theory sends certain white audiences in a meltdown. That's why the possibility of equity feels like an existential threat. That's why the truth of American history is treated like an attack instead of an accounting. Because here's the part that burns. Black people aren't making everything about race. Race was made into everything long before we had a say. It was carved in the law, stamped in the property deeds, written in the police manuals, taught in schools, enforced in courtrooms, broadcast in newsrooms, and defended fiercely by the very people who now pretend not to see it. So when someone asks, why do you have to make everything about race? The answer is, we don't. America did. We're not the architects. We're the ones living in the house that was built without us in mind and against us in practice. If you want to know why race keeps coming up, stop interrogating the people who endure the consequences. Start interrogating the people who created the conditions. You asking the wrong people. Ask the system. Ask the history. Ask the power. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe, just maybe, you're closer to the answer than you really want to admit. Why we make everything about race? You asking the wrong goddamn people. This is Open Eye. All right, Brother Anthony, I see you. WHGE 95.3 FM. Patrice Gibbs, right here on Open Eye. I expanded on this, but I like to ask every now and then. Have you ever said, if I could show you what I see? It's not a statement born of arrogance. It's born of revelation. It is what happens when you stand in one place and see beyond it. It's the frustration of knowing something that words seem too small to contain. It's the excitement of discovering a truth so beautiful that you want everyone to experience it. And sometimes it's the burden of seeing danger ahead while others continue walking toward it. Most people believe they see reality first and then the words to describe it. But what if the opposite is true? You did not choose your first language. It was given to you. Before you were old enough to question it, it had already begun shaping what you notice, what you remember, what you value, and how you move through time. The language of your family, your community, your nation, and your culture became the lens through which you learned to interpret the world. Linguist Lyra Boroditsky, her work suggests something both fascinating and uncomfortable. Language does not merely describe reality. It helps construct it. The words come first and reality follows. Language teaches us where to focus our attention and what to ignore. It influences how we organize memory, understand relationships, and even perceive time itself. And once you understand that, a difficult question emerges. If the language you think in is filtering what you're able to see, what is it that you're not seeing? That question becomes even more profound when we speak of the ancestors. When you have been privileged to hear the ancestors whisper through the veil, you begin to understand that there are truths that exist beyond ordinary language. There are realities that cannot be fully captured by vocabulary alone. There are experiences that must be felt before they can be understood. The ancestors show you the view from the bridge. The bridge between the seen and the unseen. The bridge between history and destiny. The bridge between what is and what is becoming. From that vantage point, patterns emerge. You recognize cycles where others see isolated events. You hear warnings where others hear noise. You recognize connections where others see coincidence. What appeared random reveals itself as a design. What appeared new reveals itself as an old lesson wearing a different face. And that is when the frustration begins. Because how do you explain a mountain to someone who has spent their entire life in a valley? How do you explain color to someone whose language contains no word for it? How do you explain a spiritual reality to someone whose vocabulary only allows for material explanations? You try. You tell stories. You offer examples. You point toward the horizon. But eventually you arrive at the limits of language itself, and all that remains is the simple truth. If I could show you what I see. Not because you think you are better, not because you think others are incapable, but because some truths cannot be taught. They must be experienced. Some lessons can't be explained, they got to be lived. Some visions cannot be described, they must be revealed. And when the ancestors grant you a glimpse from the bridge, you carry both a blessing and a burden. The blessing of sight and the burden of knowing that not everyone is ready, willing, or able to see what you see. Yet you keep speaking. You keep teaching. You keep pointing towards the horizon, because one day someone will arrive at that bridge for themselves. And when they do, they will look out across the vast landscape of history, memory, spirit, and possibility, and finally understand why you keep saying, if I could only show you what I see. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is the Open Eye. Open Eye listeners know that I believe in gas. What's that? Now, I don't mean indigestion. You need some Pepto-Bismol. I mean global African supremacy. But to get there, we gotta pay attention. We gotta bring ourselves together. And we got to stop allowing the colonizers to sully our land. And tell you something, that Libya, they don't want you to remember. Just so you don't get enough news, don't know what's going on over there. Too many of us. Before Libya was shattered, before militias ran the streets, before African immigrants were dragged into open-air slave markets, that's right now, open-air slave markets. There was a Libya the world refused to talk about. A Libya where electricity was free, where loans carried zero interest, where housing was a human right, not a luxury, where newlyweds actually received the equivalent of $50,000 to start their lives, where education and healthcare cost nothing, where farmers received land, equipment, livestock, and seed all free, where mothers received $5,000 at childbirth. This is in Libya, where unemployed graduates were paid the average salary of their profession until they found work. Yeah, I know you want to compare. What happens when you get unemployed here? They give you a fraction of the amount you made after you go through this trial of qualification. Libya, where oil revenue went directly into the citizens' bank accounts. Petrol costs 14 cents a liter. Where the country carried no external debt and held $150 billion in reserves. This was not a perfect system. It was not a democracy, but it was a functioning state with stability, literacy, infrastructure, and the highest standard of living in Africa. Then came 2011. According to many African analysts, historians, and critics, the destruction of Libya was not an accident. It was a geopolitical decision, a decision backed by the United States under Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and President Barack Obama. They supported NATO's intervention to remove Gaddafi. They called it humanitarian. They called it necessary. But the aftermath speaks louder than the speeches. When Gaddafi was killed, the Libyan state collapsed overnight. And into that vacuum poured the worst elements humanity has to offer. Extortion networks, warlords, militias, and human traffickers, whose primary victim was the black African. Armed groups selling human beings like spare parts. By 2017, CNN exposed what Africans have been whispering for years: black bodies being auctioned in Libya. Black men, women, children, kidnapped, beaten, extorted, and sold while trying to reach Europe. Now, the African Union expressed outrage. Investigations were promised, statements were issued. And almost a decade later, the slave markets are still there. Right out in the open. Meanwhile, the European Union has poured hundreds of millions of euros into stopping migration. Now, they don't want these people migrating over to Europe to get away from the degradation of their society that was caused by the colonizer. You remember, I'm on the air. Europeans actually funded the Libyan militias and authorities who intercept migrants. That's their job. And funnel them in the detention centers where abuse, torture, and slavery are well documented. In 2025, new reports surfaced. Women treated as commodities, valued higher because they're seen as sexual property. The videos are posted online by traffickers who fear no consequences, Africa. A global system that treats African suffering as our background noise. So let's stop pretending it's just about Libya. It's about sovereignty. This is about who gets to decide the fate of African nations. This is about what happens when foreign powers dismantle a state and walk away from the wreckage. Because when African institutions are weak, when foreign interests dictate security and economics, when corruption hollows out leadership, when global powers profit from instability, then the poorest, the migrants, the displaced, the desperate become prey. No African child should be sold in the 21st century. No African woman should be trafficked across borders like contraband. No African man should be auctioned for labor in a world that claims to be civilized. And yet, here we are. So the question, the uncomfortable, avoidable question is this: how long will Africans allow the world to decide their destiny for them? Because until African nations build institutions strong enough to protect their people from traffickers, from warlords, from foreign exploitation, and from corrupt elites, this cycle is going to continue. Libya is not just a fallen state. It's a warning, a case study in what happens when sovereignty is shattered. A reminder of what fills the void when a nation is dismantled. And a testament to the price Africans pay when global powers decide their lives are negotiable. The slave markets in Libya are not just a Libyan problem. They are an African problem, a global problem, a human problem. And until the continent stands together politically, economically, and morally, the world will continue to treat African lives as expendable. And until we put a stop to that, we cannot grasp our future of global African supremacy. Because the world was a much better place when the African ruled. This is the Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Well, as we come to the end of today's program, I want to speak directly to those who believe I should not be on the air. To those who say I'm too outspoken, too controversial, too focused on uncomfortable subjects, I have a simple question. What exactly is it that you want me to stop talking about? History, racism, poverty, homeless veterans, economic inequality, political hypocrisy, the struggles facing black communities, the failures of institutions that claim to serve the people. Because every topic discussed on this program exists whether I talk about it or not. Silencing the messenger does not solve the problem. Turning off the microphone does not erase the truth. And removing one voice does not stop people from asking questions. In fact, history teaches us something very important. The people who demand silence are almost never remembered as heroes. The people who challenge silence are. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to like me. I really don't give a damn. You don't even have to listen to me. That's your right. You could turn the dial. But it's my right to speak. My responsibility is to raise questions that others are afraid to ask. My obligation is to tell the truth as I understand it and to encourage critical thinking among those willing to engage honestly. The Open Eye is not about telling you what to think. It's about encouraging you to think. If that makes some people uncomfortable, then perhaps the discomfort is not coming from this microphone. Perhaps it's coming from what the mirror reflects when the light is turned on. And thank you for spending part of your Saturday with me. Thank you for your calls, your messages, your support, and yes, even your criticism. The conversation continues because you continue to participate. Every night, I ask the ancestors for guidance. And every morning, they charge me to ring the alarm. Knowledge is power. Truth requires courage. And freedom begins when people refuse to close their eyes. This is the Open Eye. I hope you learned something today because I learned something before I got here. And as we always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life, but you decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you and don't treat those as a priority who treat you as an option. This is the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. Thanks for joining us. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Peace. Yes, indeed, in spite of what goes on, I will always keep calling for and believing in the possibilities of global African supremacy, because the world was a much better place when the African ruled. Peace and love.